Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibhiriritam Kalmashapaham Sravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvi Grananti Ye Bhurida Jana. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna with the devotees at Dakshineshwar. The Master's conversation continues. The result of yoga through bhakti. The upshot of the whole thing is that no matter what path you follow, yoga is impossible unless the mind becomes quiet. The mind of a yogi is under his control. He is not under the control of his mind. So, that's the crux of all the yogas, the controlling of the mind. Whether it is Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga or Karma Yoga. They are the various means to control the mind. In the Jnana Yoga, we find that through discrimination, one discriminates between the real and the unreal. And as a consequence of that, the discrimination follows between the pleasurable and the preferable. That all the things which are unreal because of ignorance appear to be pleasurable. But the reality, the self to which we have to be identified in all our life, that's the thing which is preferable. And now to keep the mind in the self, again needs that practice. What's the practice? Not allowing the mind to get distracted to all the worldly entanglements, and to contemplate on the self. So it results in the controlling of the mind. In bhakti, the same thing. There, the mind is controlled because of the love for the object of your devotion, your ishta, your chosen ideal. The love becomes so intense, we find that love is the most spontaneous way of controlling the mind. That when we love something, we find that the mind is naturally drawn towards that, and the other things, they start falling off from the mind naturally. In all the love, we find that. So if a bhakta can develop the love for God, then his control of the mind becomes something natural, spontaneous. Because of the love, the other distractions fall off. His love enables him to keep the mind focused in his object of meditation, and that also is linked through emotion and devotion. So in Raja Yoga, the idea again is same. There, the control of the mind is direct. That to stop the vagaries of the mind and keep the mind in its pure state, that as has been spoken of in the Yoga Sutra, very second sutra, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, that if we can somehow curb the distractions of the mind, stop them, that ultimately will take to the realization automatically. It is all the vagaries of the mind which doesn't allow us to realize the self. So it's a very direct approach for the control of the mind. And Karma Yoga. So there also we find that if the mind is too attached to the world and it's not possible to desist from action, then let the action go on, but let me try to do it in a selfless manner. That again speaks of not getting entangled with the so-called worldly desires, constantly planning, I have to do this, I have to do that. Instead of that, what we do as a karma yogi, that the approach is neither seek nor avoid. In a particular situation of life, as per my responsibilities, I have been placed in a particular situation. I don't seek that I want this, I want that, for this constant having ambitions. I don't pursue for that, neither do I avoid my immediate responsibilities and keep myself engaged in my actions with the idea I am just an instrument in the hands of the divine. It is the divine who is working through me. And here also we find that though the actions are going on, but the mind is free from constant entanglements in the form of sankalpa and vikalpa. That we take constant resolution, and then we find that this resolution is not for me, and again I think for something alternate, and that way the mind is constantly having its own vagaries. That I stop. I become an instrument of the divine. So in all the yogas we find ultimately it's the various means as per our temperament to control the mind, and that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. The upshot of the whole thing is that no matter what path you follow, whatever it may be, whether jnana or bhakti or yoga or karma, yoga is impossible unless the mind becomes quiet. The mind of a yogi is under his control. He is not under the control of his mind. So how much we have been able to control the mind through whatever practices we have resorted to, that's the criteria. That's the benchmark of whether we are progressing in our spiritual journey or not. When the mind is quiet, the prana stops functioning. Then one gets kumbhaka. One may have the same kumbhaka through bhakti yoga as well. The prana stops functioning through love of God too. In the kirtan, the musician sings, Nitai Amar Mata Hati. Repeating these, he goes into a spiritual mood and cannot sing the whole sentence. He simply sings Hati Hati. And when the mood deepens, he sings only Ha Ha. Thus his prana stops through ecstasy and kumbhaka follows. So what he is saying something very interesting, that many of us, as a means to resort to spirituality, think of controlling the breath to control the mind. These two are related. We will find that when I am restless, our breath also becomes irregular and shallow. When my mind is calm and tranquil, the breath you will find is very regulated, it's rhythmic, and it's comparatively deep. We are breathing deeply and in a rhythmic fashion when the mind is calm. It happens naturally. So these two are riveted, the mind and the breath. So as they are riveted, we will find that both the ways we can have control over the prana. What's that? We can control the prana, the breath, to control the mind, and vice versa. We can control the mind to control the breath. Now, for a person who through all these various yogas, whether it is bhakti or jnana or raja or karma, have attained the state of tranquility, the mind is calm, we find that the more the mind is calm, the more the breath is becoming subtle. It becomes subtle. The breath is almost not felt. Even if you place some cotton just beneath his nose, you will find the cotton is not moving. It has become so subtle. That's the test, whether the yogi is breathing or not. The breathing becomes very subtle and the mind becomes calm. Now, seeing that, if we think that let me control the breath to control the mind, yes, that is possible, but that is harmful in the long run. Instantly, it may give some very good result, that I practice kumbhaka and I find that it's a very easy way to control the mind, but this becomes obsessive practice, because suddenly by just controlling the breath, I control the mind. This is called hatha yoga. Hatha yoga. By force I am doing. In the long run, it can be very, very harmful. How? that we find that even in the modern science, in the modern neurology, they say that the brain cannot store energy. That with each and every breath, the blood is getting oxygenated, and that oxygenated blood is constantly nourishing the brain. If the breath stops, the first thing that gets affected is the brain. So what happens when I am forcefully stopping the breath? Actually, immediately the nourishment of the brain stops. The brain starts starving. And as a result, it creates a type of numbness. Your thoughts, the vacillation of your thoughts, that gets quieted. But we are doing it at the cost of the nourishment of the brain. And that results in the damage of the brain cells. Very gradually it starts damaging. And in the long term, it do harms our mental health. It do harm our mental well-being. There are many cases who have become mentally deranged. So it may give some immediate a type of ecstasy, because suddenly you find just by controlling the breath, the mind has become a bit numb. And that gives a type of rest. But we are doing it at the cost of the nourishment of the brain. It starts starving, and that can derange the brain in long run. So that's the thing which is harmful. Sri Ramakrishna is also indicating the same thing. But if the opposite, if we control the mind, it has its effect on the breath. Why it happens? That again in our science, there is something called BMR, basal metabolic rate. What that speaks of? That even when I am not doing any physical activity, suppose at night I am in deep sleep, then also the energy is expended. There is a basal, a basic energy is constantly being expended. How? That even when I am sleeping, my heart is working, even my mind is working. If you do this electrocardiogram, you will find the waves in the mind. Your lungs are working, all the vital organs are working, and they need some basal amount of energy to keep functioning. And that's the energy which is called the basal energy to continue with your metabolism, basal metabolic rate. So even when I'm in deep sleep, my body is expanding. That's called the BMR. Now, the one who has developed that capacity to concentrate his mind, keep the mind free from thoughts, his BMR reduces. That for a person who is extremely restless, his BMR is very high. That even without doing any activities, he is expending a lot of energy because his mind is very active. To keep the mind active, he needs a lot of energy. The one who has calmed down his mind, not only mind, with the calming down of the mind, our heart rate also reduces. You will find that all the bodily other activities, they also slow down. And that speaks of the lower BMR, the lower basal metabolic rate. And when we have lower basal metabolic rate, what happens? We don't need that much of energy to just continue with all the functions, the basic functions of all our vital organs. So the more energy they need, the more oxygen is needed, because that's the fuel. And then you have to breathe hard. And when the BMR reduces, naturally you don't need to breathe hard, because that level of this energy, this basic level of energy has reduced. So even with less fuel, for the fuel there is oxygen, the body can continue. So what happens? Naturally, when the mind gets calmed down, the breathing also becomes more and more subtle. And then it doesn't harm, because after all, your BMR has reduced. You don't need that much of energy. So when you're calming down the mind, then the breath automatically calms down, and that doesn't harm, because you have reduced the need for the energy. But in the contrary, when I am stopping my breath, I am just making my brain starve. And that gives a very placid sensation because the mind has been numbed for the time being, but in the long run it harms. But the contrary, true yoga, whether it is Jnana Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, when the mind calms down, the mind stands still, you will find the breath also becomes almost, it stands still. And that's the state of Kumbhaka which you have attained naturally. So we will find that there are many so-called this yoga schools. They speak of instant samadhi through all those breath control. Know it for certain that we become almost addicted to it at the cost of our real psychic well-being. Spiritual progress should be slow and steady. As Swami used to say, that for the spiritual journey is actually can be spoken of as nothing but 3P: purity, patience, perseverance. If anyone says that I can make you have some realization immediately, never believe him. It's as of the age-old tradition. It has been spoken of as something which needs patience and perseverance. It's a slow and steady process. And we should have that patience, that perseverance to resort to that. That is a time-tested procedure that in no way harms us. And that's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating here. So when the mind is quiet, the prana stops functioning. Then one gets kumbhaka. That's natural. One may have the same kumbhaka through bhakti yoga as well. So same thing, when your mind enters into a state of flow because of their tremendous love for your Ishta, it has started, the mind doesn't register the other bodily activities at all. And that speaks of calming down of all the bodily activities. And as the bodily activities calms down, there is no need for the fuel. The breath also gets suspended. So that's what he's saying. There's the same thing that kumbhaka happens to bhakti yoga as well. The prana stops functioning through the love of God too. In the kirtana, the musician sings Nitai Amar Mata Hati. So that's the thing we indicated previously also. There's a kirtan. First, what we are doing? We are resorting, instead of trying to concentrate the mind on just one word, we do Lila Dhyanam. This is called Lila Dhyana. What's the Lila Dhyana? That in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we find that there are so many instances that where he will become ecstatic during Kirtana. So ecstatic that full of that fervor and emotion that he will appear like a mad elephant dancing out of this ecstasy. So that's the thing which is indicated in this line. Nitai, Nimai Amar, Nitai Amar, Mata Hati. This Gaur and Nitai, Nityananda and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They together will dance down the street and they will appear like a mad elephant, so full of ecstasy. So that's the thing. Now you are meditating and through that kirtan, you are singing. So what happens? So this speaks of meditating on certain lila, on the lila dhyana. There's a sequence of actions. What's the sequence of action? That we find that it is referring to certain incidents in the life of Nityananda and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So your mind is actually not focused to some very limited thing. You are meditating on the entire episode of that life, that they are going down the street and dancing like the mad elephant, full of ecstasy. So it gives you a sequence of thoughts. So the mind is traversing through all those thoughts, but at the same time it is not getting distracted to all other worldly distractions. So though it gets a particular bandwidth, but that bandwidth is restricted only to the thought of the divine. And when through that kirtana, your mind becomes more and more focused. Very interesting. When the bandwidth of the mind gets focused, we'll find that our words also, that we lose the capacity to have that entire vocabulary. What this Ramakrishna is saying, then he will just go on repeating Mata Hati, Mata Hati. That's why this idea is something very important. In all this Sanatana Dharma tradition, the common thing is there are so many Ishta, idea of the concept of Ishta. Some are the worshippers of Ganesha, the Ganapatyas, some are the worshippers of Shiva, some of the Shakti, some of Vishnu, in the various avatars, either Rama, Krishna, whatever it may be. But one thing is common, that when we do the japa, that everyone is initiated as per their Ishta, they get the mantra, and you will find a wonderful thing. Whatever may be the mantra, that mantra is linked with Omkara. It starts with Om. Why? Because when your mind really gets focused, to keep the mind in the entire mantra becomes very difficult. When the mind becomes focused, that the entire mantra, repeating of entire, that speaks of quiet, this prolonged bandwidth. Now the mind has become very focused. The mind cannot keep that considerably larger bandwidth. In that it cannot keep focused. It wants a still shorter bandwidth. So what happens? At last, you will find the entire mantra starts falling off. And your mind has to hold on to something. It holds on to Omkara. As in some other context, Sri Ramakrishna in this gospel says that Shandha merges in Gayatri, Gayatri merges in Omkara. What's the idea? Sandhya speaks of that before a Brahmin, that for all that in the junction, in the dawn, in the dusk, he is supposed to repeat the Gayatri mantra. And not only that, when he sits for repeating the Gayatri mantra, he has to do certain rituals. That speaks of the Sandhya Vandana. Some rituals, some other prayers, and then at last he has to resort to the Gayatri. When the mind becomes very focused, first that rituals fall off. It's no more needed. These rituals were helping to concentrate his mind. Now it's no more needed. It is more focused. So Sandhya merges in Gayatri. So he now holds on to the Gayatri alone. Those rituals falls off naturally. And when his mind becomes still more focused, that Gayatri is too long. He cannot keep the mind in that entire chanting. So naturally it will start merging in something, and that what's something which is the basal thing which remains is the Omkara, the most undistorted sound. In that the mind holds on to that Omkara and gets absorbed in a deep meditation. The same thing here Sri Ramakrishna is saying, it happens in the Kirtana. You have started with the Lila Dhyana, you are meditating on a particular episode of the life of the divine incarnation, and then the line with the sentence with which you were meditating, that becomes too big, and now just you hold on to a particular word. What's that word? This mad elephant. He cannot repeat the entire sentence, Nitai Amar Mata Hati. He just goes on repeating Mata Hati, Mata Hati. And then at last, that Mata Hati is also too long. Somehow he just says Ha, and he goes into this state of Samadhi. And there again we find that Kumbhaka, his breath has got naturally suspended. This just say Ha, and his breath has got suspended. And sometimes we may feel that is it true that in spiritual life, whenever these examples are given, sometimes we may feel these are all just glorifications. Too much of glorification. It most probably doesn't have to do anything with the real life. So that's why sometimes that we will find that the teacher, if they're a real capable teacher, what he does, he will now bring some examples from our day-to-day life and compare it with this, so that we can have a conviction, yeah, it is possible. For that, Sri Ramakrishna also is doing the same thing. What he's saying, that after saying this example, he will say very interesting. Suppose a man is sweeping a courtyard with his broom, and another man comes and says to him, hello, so-and-so is no more, he is dead. Now, if the dead person was not related to the sweeper, the latter goes on with his work, remarking casually, that's too bad, he is dead, he was a good fellow. The sweeping goes on all the same. But if the dead man was his relative, then the broom drops off from his hand. He exclaims, and he too drops to the ground. His prana has stopped functioning. He can neither work nor think. Haven't you noticed among women that if one of them looks at something or listens to something in speechless amazement, the other women say to her, "What? Are you in ecstasy?" In this instance too, the prana has stopped functioning, and so she remains speechless, with mouth agape. It happens in our day-to-day life. These are the examples. Even for us, we will find when you are watching the movie, the climax, some scene in the climax, if you notice, you find your breath has stopped. Your mind has got so focused in it. The more the mind is focused, the more the distractions fall off. Your breath naturally stops. And that's the thing which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. That what's the indication that your mind has become concentrated? It has become extremely focused. Your breath becomes suspended naturally. And that's the thing which is desirable. The opposite, we're forcefully stopping the breath to calm down the mind. It happens, but that can be extremely harmful. So Sri Ramakrishna, that's why he's giving an example from the day-to-day life to explain that stopping of the functioning of the mind suspends our breath. It suspends our breath. It will not do merely to repeat, "I am he, I am he." There are certain signs of a jnani. Narendra has big protruding eyes. Pointing to a devotee, he also has good eyes and forehead. Actually, this other devotee is none other than the author of the gospel, M. So M also had this big eyes, protruding eyes, and a big forehead. If you recall the very first interaction of Sri Ramakrishna with Mahendranath, the author of this gospel, first time when he saw him, seeing his external, this bodily signs, he immediately understood that he has that capability, he has that qualification to progress in spiritual life very fast. And that's why seeing him was very eagerly, first thing he asked, that, "Are you married?" When he said yes, Ramakrishna said, "Alas, he has married." And then the next question, do you have children? And then again when he said yes, and then Ramakrishna was really very much that way frustrated. "Oh, you have children too. Why?" It's not that he is discouraging marriage or having children. It's okay. But seeing Master Mahashaya, he found that he had that potentiality of spiritual, tremendous spiritual progress. His bodily signs showed that. So that's why he thought that he was a person who could have progressed spiritually much faster if he didn't have those entanglements. So it was very specific for him. It's not for all. So that's the thing he's indicating here. He also has good eyes and forehead. It will not do merely, why he's saying that certain persons, their bodily signs show that they have been born with a particular samskara. That even in modern, medical science, they say that all our diseases are psychosomatic. Our mind, psycho means mind, somatic means body. The mind affects the body. With our thought, our body starts changing. So by seeing particular sign of the body, you can find out the way the mind is functioning. You will find that sometimes a holy man is very radiant, full of radiance, and he looks very healthy and radiant. Why? When the mind is calm, that has its direct effect on his health, on his well-being. So we find that it's something very common that everyone has experienced that. So with the calming down of the mind, with seeing a person, you can feel that he is meditative. When Swami Vivekananda was in the West, even in the newspapers of America, this was mentioned in so many, that his demeanor shows that he is someone like Buddha. He is an adept in meditation. Just even for a normal person, it becomes something easy to decipher just by seeing the bodily signs. So here also Sri Ramakrishna is indicating that he was an expert in this particular this by physiognomy, by seeing the signs of one's this body, of his physique. He could find out his mental bent, the mental temperament. So here also he is doing the same thing. Just many will be meditating, and that meditation is just mechanical because he still don't have that particular bent of mind. So that's why he's saying it is just not just mere repeating, I am he, I am he. You should have that basic samskaras, and that is proven by all those bodily signs, by all those physiognomy. It can be proven that yes, you do have samskara. And for such a person, the meditation can really help him to progress spiritually at a much, much faster rate, because his samskaras are attuned for the spiritual growth. So that's the thing which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. Different classes of men. All men are by no means on the same level. It is said there are 4 classes of men: the bound, the struggling, the liberated, and the ever free. It is also not a fact that all men have to practice spiritual discipline. There are ever free and those who achieve perfection through spiritual discipline. Some realize God after much spiritual austerity, and some are perfect from their very birth. Prahlad is an example of the ever free. So these 4 classes he is speaking of. The bound, that those who are not aware of the spiritual dimension of our existence, they think that this life is the be-all and end-all of our existence. Even in modern times, this adage, this proverb is very common. What people say, everywhere the people say, even what they say? That you have one life. What's the idea? Enjoy it. You have only one life. So what's the idea here? That this speaks of our bondage, that our eyes are as if covered. We are short-sighted. That spiritual dimension, the portal for the spiritual dimension has not opened up at all. And we have no faith in that, majority of that. So they go on suffering in this life, but still they think this is the be-all and end-all. They say that yes, suffering is something which is a common thing in life, but in spite of suffering, we do have happiness a little, and to get those little happiness is the be-all and end-all of our existence. Even in positive psychology, they say the same thing, that we cannot think of happiness as something, a continuous flow. Happiness is something like dots. How to increase those dots in your life, that's what speaks of your happiness, nothing more than that. So what it speaks of, this is a bound soul. They are bound to suffer because they in no way can relate to the spiritual dimension of their existence. I have no faith on that. And some have faith, but because of the past strong samskaras, they find that though they have developed that faith in the spiritual dimension of their existence, it becomes very difficult for them. It is very difficult for them to be attuned to that. So they are struggling. They're constantly trying. And then through all the struggle, some have went beyond this, all these struggles have attained a state where he is always aware of his spiritual dimension of existence. And from that plane, he can be just the witness. He transcends. It's not that the suffering stops. The body can still go through all the dualities of life in the form of pain and pleasure. But he knows he is not the body, he is not the mind, he is something beyond that. And as he is identified with that, he has transcended the suffering. He knows the suffering is of the body and the mind, and they are like the garments. It is not he. He is not suffering. He is just experiencing the suffering which is going on through the body-mind. Just that reminds me of a Greek philosopher. His name was Diogenes. He always used to say the world is a dream. Everything is a dream. It's just like Vedanta, that idea. And now the young, all the ruffians of that society, they thought we will have to teach this man a lesson, a nice lesson. So what they did, one day they went and asked, is the world a dream? Well, yeah, this world is a dream. Like, okay, we will show you whether it's a dream or not. They tied him behind a horse carriage and then made the horse carriage run. And As he was dragged through the road with all rough surfaces, after a long distance when they stopped, he was full of bruises, he was bleeding. And then they released him and asked, "Is the world a dream?" And then his answer was wonderful. Yes, sometimes a dream can be painful, but still it's a dream. It is painful, but it's a dream. So what's the idea? That the body may go through the suffering, but he has attained that state from where he knows he is just witnessing. After all, he is not the body-mind complex. He is the one who is witnessing. So such is the state of liberation. Some are liberated. So they have transcended the dualities of life. And some are ever free. That who never fall into this ignorance at all. In some other context, Sri Ramakrishna gives a very nice example of these 4 stages. What he says, that suppose the fisherman is catching the fish. He has thrown the net in the water to catch fish. We will find there are some fish, what they will do once they are caught in the net, along with the net they will dive deep into the water, thinking the more deep they go, they will be safe. He is saying they are like the bound soul. They don't have the idea that in no time the fisherman is going to pull the net and they are going to be killed. Just they think they are quite safe. Along with the net, they just dive deep into the ocean, thinking the more deeper they go, the more safe they will be. And that's the state of bondage. Those who are always in bondage, that's the state which Sri Ramakrishna is giving the example of. And some have realized that I have fallen in the net, and now he is trying his best to jump out of the net. Of all those who are trying to jump out of the net, all cannot succeed. Some succeed. Those who cannot succeed, they are the aspiring ones. They are the ones who are struggling. And those who could jump out, they are the liberated. And then Sri Ramakrishna is saying there are certain fish, they are clever enough not to fall in the net at all. So they can somehow bypass. Even if you throw the net, they bypass. So they are like the ever free. They have never fallen in this. So he's giving, through this example, he's trying to explain. So what's the idea? So even if you have watched the movie called Matrix, there's the idea you will find that once if I know that the world is a world of virtual reality, there is no question of bondage. In our scriptures, that a very nice example is given, that when Brahma created this creation, first he created 4 beings. Shanak, Sanatan, Sanandan, Sanat Kumar. These are the 4 beings he created. Now, when he created them, the mistake he has done, he somehow, when he created this 4-person, he never made them a part of the matrix. They also could see the creation, but they knew it is something like virtual. So they were never under the bondage. They were ever free. These 4 Kumaras in our scriptures is spoken of as they are ever free. And then Brahma realized, unless what I am creating out of my mind, all the characters has to be within the matrix. And then it is impossible for them to realize. They will think that they are real. They will never realize that they are the virtual. And then that results in the bondage. That's even in Bhagavad Gita, that's the idea. Daivi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya. As we are bound by the gunas. To give an example, we will understand. The white light falling on the prism is breaking into the spectrum of 7 colors. Now one who is on the spectrum side, he never sees the white light. He sees the prism, that's the mind, and what he sees? The spectrum, these 7 colors. So for him the mind is real, the spectrum is real. That beyond the mind there is something like white light which he never has no idea. The one who is on the other side of the prism, he can see the entire thing. That it is the white light which passing through the prism is breaking into the spectrum of all these 7 colors. So the one who is on the other side of this prism he can see the entire thing. But one who is on the spectrum side, he is never aware of that white light at all. So we are on the spectrum side. We are aware of the mind. We think the mind is the ultimate reality. But that is actually the prism. Behind that, the conscious principle is there, which coming in association with the mind is being projected as this world of name and form. So the one who is on this side is like the ever born. So somehow if he has faith in the words of the scriptures and then he is aspiring, then he may be free. Otherwise he is struggling. That the struggle doesn't entail in liberation for all. And those who are not at all aware of it, then those are the bound souls. These examples are so nice. Even that there's another wonderful example. Is the example of Plato. This is Plato's example of 5 cavemen. What he says that the 5 cavemen, they were bounded in such a way, they were enchained in such a way that they were sitting facing the wall of a cave. They were all sitting on the entrance of a cave, but their face was on the wall, towards the wall. And they were enchained in such a way they cannot turn their head. What they see is the wall of the cave. They cannot turn their head to see what's going on behind. Now just outside the cave there was a road, there is a road. And on the other side of the road there is a fire, always it's lighted. Now throughout the day people used to travel through that road. From the village they used to go to the marketplace. They will go by some cart, lot of noise, lot of conversation, the noise of the carriage. So all this noise they could hear, and as the fire was on the other side of the road, the shadow of all the things, these persons and everything, used to fall on the wall of that cave. And these 5 men, from the very birth, what they saw was just the shadows, nothing else. Just they heard the noise and the shadows. And for them, as that's the only thing they have seen, that was the reality. That's the reality. Now, somehow, one of them was that the chain was removed. He was released from the bondage. So he turned around. And he was amazed, seeing this wonderful scenario outside. The landscape, the scenario. And he ran. He was ecstatic, he was delighted, seeing the sky, the horizon, the landscape. And he just ran for some time in joy, and he came back to give the news to the other 4. Well, what you are seeing as on the other side, they are actually shadows. The reality is something behind. And this 4 man, they start thinking he has gone mad. He has gone mad. Why? Because they have no idea of what he's speaking. They have not realized that. So these 4 men are like the bound soul. Even if when you say them that the reality is something which is not this shadow, what you are seeing is just the shadow of the reality. They are not the reality. They don't believe. They are the bound soul. And now if any of them have faith in that person, he will try to get rid of this bondage. He is the one who is struggling. And if somehow he manages to get rid of the bondage, he is the one also who can realize the same thing as this ecstatic person who has been unchained. So he is the one who is liberated. And the one who is never in this bondage at all, who is a person from the realm of that free world, he is never free. So this is the idea which we find Sri Ramakrishna is indicating here. What he is saying that all men are by no means on the same level. It is said there are 4 classes of men: the bound, the struggling, the liberated, and the ever free. It is also not a fact that all men have to practice spiritual discipline. So there are ever free. They never have to practice because they were never under the bondage. There are the free, ever free, and those who achieve perfection through spiritual. These are the 2 different. Some have achieved perfection through spiritual discipline, and some are ever free. Some realize God after much spiritual austerity, and some are perfect from their very birth. Prahlada is an example of ever free. So as you will find in the Purana, it is mentioned that though he was born in the family of the demon, his father was a asura, Hiranyakashipu. But from his very birth, he had there's a spiritual, this portal of the spiritual dimension was already open for him. He knew that the ultimate reality is the divine and divine alone. And that's the story which we all know. Those who have read that story of the Prahlad in the Puranas. So he is, Sri Ramakrishna saying, the example of the ever free. Eternally perfect sages like Prahlada also practice meditation and prayer. But they have realized the fruit, God vision, even before the spiritual practice. They are like the gourds and pumpkins, which grow fruit first and then flowers. So the spiritual practice for us is to attain liberation. But the one who is ever free, they also do some spiritual practices. Means it's not actually they are doing spiritual practice. From our standpoint, it appears they are doing spiritual practice. Why? The one who is ever free, he is already detached from these worldly entanglements. He is always spontaneously united with the spiritual dimension. Naturally, his mind is spontaneously indrawn. So his realization has always enables him to remain in that state. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, that realization is first and then the practice. Practice actually is not practice for him. For us, it appears as a practice. For him, that's the natural state of his existence. And then Sri Ramakrishna is giving that example, that there are some vegetables like the gourds and the pumpkins which grow fruit first and then the flowers. Generally, from the flowers, the fruit comes. But for the gourds and the pumpkins, we see that grow the fruit first and the flower. Actually, they are not the fruits. They appear like fruit. They are actually the flowers, the thalamus of the flower. So whatever it may be, so it appears as if the fruit has first grown and then the flowers. So what's the idea? That they have the realization ahead of their practice. It's actually not the practice. The spontaneous way of living for them appears as practice for us. As even Shankaracharya has said, that what is sadhana? What is spiritual practice? It is an imitation of what a realized soul does spontaneously. What is doing spontaneously, as he has the realization that this is a mere projection. The world which I am seeing is something, a superimposition. The reality is something which is a substratum on which it is superimposed. So naturally, they are identified with the substratum and they are always disassociated from this spectrum. And that appears as a sadhana for us because we find it so difficult to keep the mind indrawn. So what is spontaneous for them is practice for us. That's how Shankaracharya is defining sadhana as, that what is natural, spontaneous for a realized soul, that's when we try to imitate that, that becomes sadhana, that becomes a practice for us. So for them, that's why he's saying, the first is the fruit, then the flowers. So what they are doing is a spontaneous expression of their realization, which appears as a practice for the soul who are all under this bondage. Looking at Rakhal's father, even though an eternally perfect soul is born in a low family, still he retains his innate perfection. He cannot do anything else. A pea germinating in a heap of cow dung still grows into a pea plant. So here, unless we know the background, sometimes we find that it is just a stray remark. Why he is looking at Rakhal's father and saying this? Well, Swami Brahmananda, we find that from his very birth has a spiritual inclination. He is like that, ever free. But his father was extremely worldly minded. Why he came to Ramakrishna? Not because he was spiritually indrawn. His son used to visit and he came to know that many influential people visit Sri Ramakrishna. Knowing that, he came to Sri Ramakrishna, not to get associated spiritually. That as Sri Ramakrishna knows a lot of these influential persons, that may help him in his worldly living. That he can get this probably good links, good connections from all those influential persons. Sri Ramakrishna understood that. So that's why he's saying this thing, to Rakhal's father that even though an eternally perfect soul is born in a low family means someone who is highly worldly entangled, still he retains his innate perfection. He cannot do anything else. A pea germinating in a heap of cow dung still grows into a pea plant. So that's the thing which Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. How God has given to some greater power than to others. In one man you see it as the light of a lamp, in another as the light of a torch. One word of Vidyasagar revealed to me the utmost limit of his intelligence. When I told him of the different manifestation of God's power in different beings, he said to me, "Sir, has God then given greater power to some than to others?" At once I said, "Yes, certainly he has. If there are not different degrees of manifestation of his power, then why should your name be known far and wide? You see, we have come to you after hearing of your knowledge and compassion. You haven't grown two horns, have you?" With all his fame and erudition, Vidyasagar said such a childish thing as, "Has God given greater power to some than others?" So this idea needs some discussion, that as Sri Ramakrishna in some other context has says that as the essence, he is everywhere, but all the difference lies in manifestation. তিনি বিভু রূপে সর্বত্র, প্রকাশের তারতম্য. The difference is in the manifestation. So what's the basic idea behind it? What's the spiritual intonation behind this idea, what he's speaking? That we will try to understand. We will take up again from this conversation, that as essence he is everywhere, but the difference lies in the manifestation. So this idea we will try to discuss again in the next class. So with this we stop our discussion today on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Thank you all. Namaskar.